everyone. Welcome to the Jackie Senatori show and podcast. I have an amazing guest, and you guys know that when I choose a guest or ask somebody to come on, they are an amazing person, and she is just that. We have Erica Hornthal here, known as the therapist who moves you. She's a licensed clinical professional counselor, board certified dance and movement therapist, and founder and CEO of Chicago Dance Therapy, a practice that combines traditional talk therapy with body center practices to support the mind-body connection. She's the author of this amazing book called Body Aware. It helps you rediscover your body-mind connection, stop feeling stuck, and improve your mental health with simple movement practices. It's an exploration of how movement impacts both your mental and emotional health, and how changing your movement can support changing your mind and your life. So super glad to have her on the podcast today. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I have been doing all things you the past week of you have an awesome movement card deck and this book. And I love meeting like-minded people where you get so excited when you read their stuff of like, yes, yes, someone gets it and thinks the same way. So it's been such a pleasure.
Thank you for your willingness to put this information out there.
It's so great what you're doing. But first, I want to ask you in a funny way, how are you moving today?
I love that question. Well, right now I'm moving with lightness and ease and joy, because on Friday mornings I get to basically start my day with dance, and that is the best way for me to start my day. So Friday mornings um, tend to be a good morning, a good day for me, and then it kind of gets me ramped up for the weekend. Yeah. So yeah, I'm moving. I don't usually qualify it as good or bad, but I feel like I'm moving with ease, and that is a huge plays a huge impact on my mind.
I love it. I loved that part in your book and in your teaching. You instead of how are you doing, how are you moving? And one of the things that I really think that did, at least for me so far, is it puts your attention back on your body instead of on outside of our body. I love meditation and all the things, and putting our attention back on our body. And that question really gets you to be like, how am I moving? How am I being instead of what am I doing in my day and all of that.
Yeah, because I think so many of us reserve certain times for movement, so I'm working, I'm not moving, but I'm going to go to the gym after work. And we're missing a huge conversation and a dialogue with our own bodies if we're not recognizing how we're moving at any given point of the day, because that's, at the very least, not only perpetuating, but continuing to support the mindset that oftentimes we want to change. So,
So for everyone listening, it's really a different perspective. And it doesn't mean movement is not exercise, right? So when someone's listening to this, it doesn't mean we're going to tell you change your life by exercising. It's very different and it's unique. And some of it is subtle. And just by doing it the past few days of noticing my posture and noticing how am I moving in certain moods that I'm in, it's just small movements that are life changing. So we're not here to tell you to exercise, everybody. So it's okay. You're going to be okay.
I would not be the person to have on that podcast.
Me neither. Me either. How did you become the therapist that moves? And how did you combine your love for dance and therapy?
I say it was a combination of my stubbornness to not want to let go of dance, and also my passion for helping people. And I think, having been a natural born listener, whether I wanted to or not, it was very easy for people to come and talk to me about what was going on, and, oh, this person, this, and oh, that, and this is how I feel. So I think from a young age, I kind of had the therapy DNA in me. I come from a family of, caregivers, childhood educators, social workers. So I was in the end of high school, going into college, and that question of, what do you want to do with your life? What do you want to be? And just getting this narrative of, either when it comes to performance or dance specifically, you're going to do or you're going to teach, and I knew that I didn't have the skill set, at least the traditional skill set that was required then, because I think the platform and the landscape of dance has changed quite a bit. But it wasn't so much oh, I'm not enough. It was just, this isn't for me.
Right.
I wasn't going to be a professional dancer. I wasn't going to kind of put everything away and run off to New York City, start auditioning. Like that just terrified me. And it wasn't really something that I was passionate about. But I also wasn't a teacher. I wasn't an instructor. I really didn't want to open a studio or, teach kids. I think there's so much to be said in that work, and I'm just not the person to do it.
Right.
So I went off to college kind of undeclared as a dance major, started taking all my gen eds. And one of those classes I started to take was psychology. And I was surprised at how easy it was for me to understand the concepts. Like as I was reading them in my textbook, I remember thinking, doesn't everybody understand this? Like this is my life. I experience this phenomenon all the time. And much like people who probably study mathematics or physics, like some things just click for you. And it did. I started taking like abnormal psychology and psychodynamics, and I just found it so interesting. And so one of my college advisors, the department of the chair actually said, hey, are you familiar with the field of dance movement therapy? You could marry your two passions, your love of helping people in mental health and psychology with movement, with dance. Back then it was pretty much dance. I wasn't really thinking of it in terms of movement, and really the rest is history. I had no idea that existed. When I was in college, the field had already been around for 50-ish years. So it was new, but it wasn't brand new. And that really opened my eyes to the world of creative arts therapies in general. Started learning more about art therapy and music therapy and drama therapy. Ultimately, that led me to getting my graduate degree in dance movement therapy and counseling. And yeah, I've been advocating and practicing ever since.
It's such a good testament to what I heard in that is I knew didn't want to do this, and it's okay.
Yes.
And I didn't want to do this, and that's okay. And a lot of times people are like, what am I meant to do? But judgment blocks what came through so beautifully for you, which was what your calling came through because you weren't trying to be something that you felt you weren't. It was just my gift to the world showed up because I followed my authenticity. And
Thank you for that.
yeah, your body aware book, there's a calmness about you, even when you read it, that feels inviting and that feels safe. And so when I'm reading it, I almost could feel like a safety of being able to explore these things and get to. So you have a really nice tone when which I think is what you talked about with therapy, of people just felt safe. People just can feel where they can unpack their stuff.
It means so much because I think as I was writing it, I thought that I needed to do that through the images. I thought I remember asking, like, can we design it in a way that, when we're talking about something being big, the word itself is big, and when it's cramped, the word is smooshed together. And so just to hear you say as a reader that a lot of those elements still came across, that you can,
Yeah.
I've had people say, I couldn't not be embodied while I was reading this book,
Yes,
and
yes.
it's like, that's the whole point, that the book it's not just here's some exercises, like the whole book is the practice. So I'm so glad to hear that. Like that's like the best feedback I could ever receive.
Yes, you're so welcome. It really did feel that way. And the embodiment it gives you permission to, because it's not telling us what to do. It's teaching how certain things, because this talk with me and you is all going to be about healing emotional stuff, healing trauma, and how can we change our mood and change our life by simple movements, by the way we're sitting, by the way we're acting when we're upset, when you're going through a hard time, when you're emotionally challenged, when you have anxiety, when you're triggered in the present moment, and how movement can play a big role in that. And then also for people, when you speak about past trauma that we maybe don't remember, and we are the way that we are today, and we're triggered and we're not sure why, and how you bring movement and how movement affects that and how movement can really make you heal.
And I always like to say that while the conversation around somatics, body embodiment is really focused on trauma right now, that even though I touch on it a little bit in the book because I kind of felt responsible, like I needed to address it in some way, that this practice is for everyone, right? Because I think that we've been conditioned to think, well, everybody has trauma, which in some way, shape, or form is true. I mean, the world collectively is in a trauma, right? But For many people that don't know it or don't identify with that word, a lot of somatic practices are a turnoff because they're centered around trauma. And then it's like, well, I don't have trauma, so this isn't for me. So to speak to that place, like you said, how does movement, what's kind of the point of it, right?
Right.
Why are we using it? How does it support mental health? It's like at any given moment when we're in those struggles, as you mentioned, the anxiety, the depression, the fear, the uncertainty, whatever emotion's coming up for us, that's a challenge that feels like a block, or we're stuck in it, it's preventing us from moving forward. So much of that is in our minds. And in order to quite literally identify how it feels and how it exists, in order to let it go, or again, as I say, like to move through it, we have to bring the body on board. We have to literally be able to drop into our body and what it's experiencing. And that's really scary for a lot of people too, because it's very unknown. For people who have or do identify with trauma, going into the body is like returning to the site of the trauma. And much like, if you were in a burning building, it can be hard to return to that building. It's hard to return to the body. We don't want to be in the pain or acknowledge the pain. So I found that just simply noticing how our movement appears or shows up in those moments. We're really accustomed to hearing fight, flight, freeze, fawn, faint, those kinds
Yep.
of things. Just because we're in freeze doesn't mean our body's frozen, right? There are movement qualities. There are things about our movement signature that are happening that signal, oh, I'm in freeze. I can't move. I can't think. So I think encouraging what's already happening, noticing my palms are sweaty, my hands are clenched, my torso's tight, my jaws, frozen or immobile. These are the places to start. We have to meet as therapists. We talk about this all the time. Like we have to meet our clients where they are, and we can do the same thing for ourselves. So just looking at how the body is showing up allows us to drop into it and out of the mind, but then also in real time allows us to make change. We can shift through that. We can make those
Right.
small adjustments. So all of a sudden we feel more mobile. We feel like we have more fluidity or flow. To speak to just what you said about the trauma piece, right? Is like all of our early experiences are from the body. We weren't born thinkers. We weren't born thinking our way through or logically reasoning, oh, mother's busy. This is why I'm not being fed.
Right.
We just know what we feel. We feel uncomfortable. We have a need that's not being met, and we have to make that known. And so much of that is nonverbal. And yet, as we get older, we think that, okay, now that I have these higher processes, I can go from the top down and solve everything.
Mhm.
Again, not the case, because it brings us into these early developmental movement patterns, often that were developed before the age of 3. So to address them, we have to go back to those pre-verbal movements. We have
Yep.
to go back to the time where, the primitive brain, that limbic system even is activated, is not activated and like overwhelmed, but using that as the tool, as the catalyst. And that's body, it's sensation and it's movement.
And when you're around children that are of a younger age, they don't know why they're feeling some way. And it's like everybody wants them to put words to it. And what if sad is just okay? I'm
Yeah.
sad. We don't need to know why. We don't need to change or to stop. It's like, oh, where do you feel that in your body? Can we just give sad a presence? And you talk about awareness in the book. And I think that's what you just spoke a lot about of just becoming aware of it. Then the rest is okay. Now, what do we do with this awareness? But at least giving it that stage. And one of the biggest things, at least for myself and the work that I've learned is judgment stops that. When we make it wrong how we're feeling, that kind of closes that, it puts the cap on, well, my hands are sweaty and I'm very nervous and it's okay. And then it moves through that with why. Or we might get a picture or a memory or a whatever it
Yeah.
is.
We're waiting for it to go away. Oh, my heart's racing. So as soon as it's done, then I can go back to what I was doing.
Yes.
As opposed to like one of the things I love to do is meeting the intensity, through the body. So if I'm noticing that rapid heart rate and it's dysregulating or it's really drawing my attention, find a way to externalize it. Tap the rhythm on the table, doodle it on your paper with with ink. Create a vision or an expression of it using your finger and the air in front of you. It's what we're feeling, and when we validate it and we witness it and we move with it, oftentimes that alleviates it, right? Or it changes our relationship to it. And then we're not afraid of it. We're not waiting for it to end. We can't wait for our emotions to end to live life, right?
Yes.
To move on, to keep going. It benefits us to move with the emotions. And then it sounds cliche and a little cheesy sometimes, but it's like then we befriend them, and then they're not elusive, they're not scary. They're just something we experience. And then when we're able to experience them, we can witness our kids experiencing them. We can be like, we can create space for, wow, that's really frustrating. What does that look like? How does that frustration feel? Yeah, let's do that together, and you're stomping it out or, screaming at the top of your lungs where it's,
Yes.
where it's, I'm gonna say appropriate, but we're teaching our kids and ourselves that it's okay. Like you said, it's appropriate. It's okay to know and experience what we feel instead of now's not the time. Do it later. Tell me your, use your
Right.
words.
Yeah. So much of it is like, wow, I feel really angry. And if I feel that, that's not safe. So I'm going to pretend I'm not angry and make feeling angry or whatever it is, frustrated, jealous, like all these things that people are like, I don't want to feel that. But then they pop up as headaches. And then they pop up as, you talk about in the book, like disease in your body, because your body's like, hey, I want to discharge this. So at work, or when you feel triggered driving, or when you feel in the moment of where you are, what's something someone can do that might not be able to, that they want to stop it because they're at work, or it's not the time now to process. I'm just thinking of someone's driving over a bridge and they're having anxiety or something. What do they do in those moments, or can they do in those moments? And I asked this because as I was reading your book and I had my own moments of something, I would notice I have my leg up, or I cross
Mm-hmm.
my legs a lot, or I sit on my feet. I'm like, okay, let's see if I'm feeling this. If I just do what one of the exercises in your book was, just uncross your legs, just sit up
Right.
straight. There was a very funny thing, and I think I'm going to read it to you as far as I laughed out loud and I circled it for you. It was so funny of you say, try this, sit in your chair with your chin lowered, your eyes down, and your torso slouched. And then ask yourself, if I stayed in this position for an extended period of time, how might this impact my mood? Well, I laughed because I was in that exact position reading
Mm-hmm.
your book, slouched, head chin down,
You're like, I don't
reading.
have to really go there. I'm already there. Yeah.
But it was so funny because it's just what happens if I adjust? Speak to that. What does somebody do that's listening when they're like, oh, I'm overwhelmed, but it's not the moment to be able to express it in movement or run as fast as I feel like my body's going inside or
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think one, that realization of it's not convenient, right? It's not convenient to be feeling this right now, and so that's discomfort, right? And so we
Mhm.
just want to appease that, right? I don't want to feel pain right now. I just want to be XYZ,
Right.
happy or calm.
Yep.
Um, as hard as it is, or as counterproductive as it may seem, the first thought I had was to lean into what you're feeling, and so I know that um, that's going to depend on where we are and what the situation is. And I don't necessarily want to force people to exaggerate something that's already uncomfortable, but we tend to do the opposite. We notice it, we're afraid of it, and we're like, oh God, I can't go there.
Mhm.
Instead of even physically like leaning into what we're feeling, maybe I'm feeling like, oh, it's really tight in my chest. Like, lean into that for a moment, So maybe I need to exaggerate it a little bit. Sometimes we get tighter before we loosen up, you know? Again, if we're noticing a jitteriness in our body, is there a way that we can bring that? I don't want to say more of it into the body, but notice it and kind of move it, right? So, for example, if I'm sitting in the car and I'm starting to feel anxious, for me, it's usually my torso, it's kind of in my chest. And I'm like gripping the steering wheel, And so for me, sometimes it's like loosening the grip on the steering wheel and letting my fingers wiggle, you know.
Mhm.
If the radio's not on, I'll put the radio on and I will, identify with a rhythm that's on, and either again move my body. Maybe it's finding the rhythm in my head or lifting a shoulder. So that's why I would say awareness, because
Yeah.
we first really have to be aware of what we're experiencing,
Right.
because otherwise we're just in reaction. I'm anxious, and so I put the pedal to the metal and I'm driving faster. Right?
Yeah.
That's not going to help us calm down. So in a way that's possible, if we can lean into that and be curious about how I'm showing up in this emotion, that's one thing. If that's not possible, because that takes separation, a little bit of like, what am I doing? And am I conscious of it? Anchoring, right? Finding stability in our environment. And so for some people, as opposed to loosening the grip on my steering wheel, sometimes it's actually finding a grip,
Yeah.
right? Like feeling more connected to something. Or, if you have one hand on the wheel, I can put my other hand like gently on the armrest, or push it into the center console, really feel my foot on the pedal. Or if my other foot, it's rare that both of our feet are on the pedals unless we're driving manual.
Yeah.
Really push your other foot into the floor of the car. Like start to feel that reverberation, right? The connection between the floor and how the energy comes up through your body. It's not always about creating a straight posture, right? But just notice your posture. So when we're anxious, we constrict, we confine, we get more condensed. And so you might notice like, oh, my shoulders are hunched, right? Well, can I do something with that? Can I drop them? Can I, uncurve or unclench my hips, my bottom? It's not that easy for people who are in it. So I always suggest like leave little messages for yourself in the areas where you get most overwhelmed. If you have anxiety in the car a lot, put a little post-it, on the console, or maybe even like, the center of the steering wheel that reminds you to do things that help you relax. Like, exhale, ground your foot. Like it's okay to remind ourselves to do these things because when we need them, we might not remember.
It's so true. And that's why I think repetition, when you do certain things, really helps you in those moments because it's not like you have to learn them only in the heightened
Mhm.
moments. Like when people want confidence, it's like practice it. And then for the moments that you do feel like you go into maybe a social setting or something, then it'll be more easy to kind of tap into.
Yeah, we can't bring it in when we're overwhelmed. That's not how we learn, right? It's like
Right.
that's when a lot of those cognitive executive functioning things go offline. So it really benefits us to practice these things when we are feeling, at our most ease or less overwhelmed or overstimulated or outside of the environment where we know we're going to be compromised, where we're going to be activated.
What is something someone can do listening that wants to start incorporating movement into their daily life to practice to work up to those kind of those bigger ones?
Lots of different things. I think I go back to like, what are some of the things we learned as children, which many of us don't remember. And that's not to say that this is the exhaustive list, but that's often why I go back to sensory.
Yeah.
When was the last time you visited the five senses? And we know that there's so much more than the five senses, but we're not looking to go right into interoception, which is internal sensation. We're not looking to go right into proprioception, which is the awareness of me in space, but just go to what you smell, you taste, you see, you feel. I mean, most of us are drinking our coffee somewhere at some point during the day. Like, drink it, taste it, feel it, touch it. I'm very aware of those things, but some of us were overly sensitive and so we avoid it, right? Or we're just on autopilot and we're like, I don't know, coffee's coffee. I just know I need it. So really tap into those senses, as if you were experiencing them for the first time. And those cliches of like, stop and smell the roses, look up to the sky, like notice what's around you. That's sometimes the best way to start reorienting to experiencing the language of the body. And then we can move from there. If you're already there and you're like, oh yeah, I'm pretty tapped into my senses, then really it becomes about noticing what movement you're already doing. And then we're looking to expand it. So we talked about exercise early. It's like, I run every day. Okay, great. But that doesn't actually expand our resilience. It keeps us pretty stable in the same movement patterns all the time. So while yoga might not be your thing, what are some things you can do to encourage your body to slow down, right? Or to sustain movement if we're used to sprinting or running at a fast pace? So we're looking to build a more robust movement profile, not just move.
There was some part where you said, the change is not about being comfortable. It's about learning to identify and sit in the discomfort. How can we expand our repertoire of what's easy for you? Moving really fast is easy for me. What's harder for me is to slow down. And so it's interesting. Some people, they move really slow and that's comfortable. And then when people have to speed up, that becomes uncomfortable. So does
Right.
practicing these sort of strengthen your muscle for doing like how does incorporating these things lead to changes or lead to things changing in your life?
Yeah, so it very easily actually expands the capacity for us to move things through our body, right? So whether you think of it as kind of like real estate, or your home, as most people will think of like their body sometimes as like their home, we're really shutting off different rooms, and then we're only moving in the kitchen. Think
Right.
about like if something is feeling threatened and you are trapped in one room, there's really not a lot of places for you to go. You start looking like under the cabinet, or I can go on top of the refrigerator. So we're looking at, okay, if this is my chest and I'm really only moving in my chest, then if I add a room, right, I'm adding my elbow to my fingertips, I have another place to go, not to escape, right? I'm not looking to escape, but we're looking to move. So whatever I'm feeling in my chest, oh my gosh, now I'm extending that movement and I can move it out to my arms. So if anybody can see, I'm like stretching my arm out and I'm wiggling my fingers. So we're teaching the trapped feelings, sensations, emotions to move through the body. And that releases tension, right? It dispels a lot of that charge that we hold on to throughout the day. For anyone that is uncomfortable just thinking about change, like
Right.
I don't want to move differently.
Yes.
Something I do with my clients and like on my own too is just practice putting your body in something that's not dysregulating but uncomfortable, right? So that can be crossing your non-dominant leg,
Yes.
brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand I talk about, or even get creative. You can do this with your kids and like take on a statue, or have your kids, or vice versa, put you like move your body kind of like a doll, right? In whatever position with their permission, right? That they can do, right? So you might have like your left arm touching the top of your head and your right arm behind your back, and your legs are twisted like a pretzel. And no one would really stand or sit in this position, but we're teaching ourselves to be in the discomfort
Mhm.
and to modulate through it, right? And so now I'm like, okay, I'm going to bring this arm down, and I'm going to bring this arm around, and I'm going to uncross my legs, and I'm going to find security and stability in my body again. Very simple practice, and it can take 30 seconds to a minute. We can do that in our chair while we're at our desk. It's like lean into the discomfort and then find ways to build comfort around that.
So great. And then that's what that's building is resilience, right? Is that
Yes. Yeah, because there's tons of research that shows like resilience is really a lot of, again, how
adapting?
broad our movement capacity is, but also even just in the spine, like spinal flexion, spinal mobility. That's where we hold our self-awareness. So think about like how rigid our spine gets or how curved it gets. That when we start to really bring the self into movement, we have the capacity to handle things differently,
Mhm.
recognize when they're not okay, set better boundaries. It's not just taking on more, right? It's not like, oh, I can move through this 80-hour work week.
Right.
Or I can say, whoa, 80 hours is way too much.
Right.
I'm going to cut back to 50, which is still a lot, but like that's a huge decrease, right?
It's the body's wisdom, and you speak to this in the book, and I really do live by this or teach by this too, is if we don't listen to the body's wisdom, the body's gonna scream. So
Mhm.
why people listening to this is like, well, I'm very comfortable not doing all those things. Why would I change it? And it's like, well, then life's gonna give you feedback. So you might as well change it willingly and then instead of having to change it, instead of waiting
Right.
for things to break down where it's 80 hours a week is just too much and you have a breakdown, when we could have listened and created this practice to get the wisdom of this is too much, it's not sustainable, let me make a change and listen
Mhm.
to my body.
Yeah. And change is hard. I mean, I know that. I think I
Yeah.
mentioned that many times too.
Yep.
But like, I have trouble changing, And so I just found for me, and again, the work that I've done with my clients, it's like, let's decenter, let's move away from the problem, right? The
Mhm.
cognitive, like, I need to stop smoking. I need to lose weight. I need like the
Yep.
shoulds, the woulds, the coulds.
Yeah.
And let's practice moving to foster change, right? I'm teaching my body that, wow, at any given point in time, I'm creating change in my body. So
Right.
change is possible. And then it's like, well, like, I am able to change. I can change the shape
Yes.
of this. I can move. I can stand up. I can sit down. Maybe there are other things that I can change. So change in the body creates momentum, that creates initiation, and it's the initiation, right? The intrinsic motivation that we need to make all the changes we're looking to change. So it's not so much like, oh, I'm going to use movement, specific movement
Right.
to change my body. It's I'm using movement as a metaphor,
Right.
right, to help show me that change is possible.
It's such a side way, or this is the embodying part of the work that you teach. I think it's an easier, soothing way as opposed to addressing it just mindset. Well, this is what you
Mhm.
need to do. Shift your mindset. Change is possible. Look at all these ways, and people's bodies resist against that. You're
Right.
kind of bringing them into the ease and letting them experience that and learn that for themselves.
Yeah. I mean, that's how it feels for me. Like affirmations are great, but they don't work for everybody in that
Right.
way, and or we need a more holistic approach to it, right? So what is that embodiment of the affirmation? I love myself. Okay, you can say that, but can you embody it too? Because research shows, right, that coming from that holistic piece, not just saying it, but actually feeling it is what creates that new habit, that rewiring in our brain. So move, I love myself as you say it out loud and see how that changes.
So good. So if someone's listening to that and they're like, okay, I can do that, what would be an example that you would, someone brand new at it, if they say, oh, I love myself and they don't feel it. And they're like, okay, let me see if I can move and do what you just said. What would be
Mm,
a simple thing they can do to move with, I love myself?
yeah, well, so obviously, like the movement I think of is going to be probably different from anybody
Yeah.
else's. Love can be hard, right? Because if we're like, I want to love myself, but I don't,
Yeah.
right? So think about something that you do have a loving connection with and notice what that brings up, right? So if it's a warmth in your chest, right? Maybe there's not a movement per se, but you can place your hand on your chest, right? And feel that sense of connection to love or affection for someone or something else. And then as you say it, right? I love myself. So I'm feeling connection to that love, but now I'm trying to bring it to me. I have a friend now, colleague Kathleen Hendricks, who runs the Hendricks Institute with her husband Gay, also the Foundation for Conscious Living. I was like,
Yes.
yeah. So she says one of the things she practices or tells people to practice are love scoops. Love scoops. This is really tied to melting away certain forms of fear, but just the idea of like scooping in, bringing something to you, right? So that might be something possible for people, that it might not feel like love per se, but it says I'm necessary, I'm needed, I'm enough, and I deserve, right? So we're like, I love me, right? Or I love myself, or I want to love myself, and just allow yourself to reach out and pull something back into you. Um, it's going to be different for everybody, right? But that's one of the things in movement too, is like, okay, this is love, and this is how we move it. No,
Right.
I don't know. I don't know what
Right.
your love is. you know, we might be really familiar with the absence of love, and so can we connect to points of of life or people or things that we do find that connection with, embody that, and then bring that in as we say, I love me or I want to love me.
I love the way you explain that. It's almost like a transfer of energy. I used to
Mm.
find like if someone's like, I'm just always nervous, and it's like, find a part of your body that's not nervous right now. And we used to put our hands
Yeah.
on that part of our body and then bring it to the part of our body. It's almost like teaching this part of your body to rewire that part of your body. When you were speaking, I thought of I have a little golden doodle puppy, and I'm thinking,
Oh,
you just look at him and you just feel this overwhelming sense of love, of cuteness. And it's like, tap into that. And then it
yeah.
brings you into the energy of love. Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
love
I,
that.
I do
Yeah.
that. I do that with clients with pain, right? So someone coming in that's, identifies with their pain, right? Like
Yes.
whether they want to or not, I have
Right.
this, right? I've lived with this
Right.
forever. It can be so hard to identify parts of the body that maybe aren't pain free, but I also use the word neutral.
Yes.
So okay, this part isn't void of anxiety, but is there a part that's neutral? And I
Right.
laugh, but I I joke around sometimes, but I'm like, remember your earlobe, your
Yeah.
elbow, the tip of your nose, like
Yeah.
these are places that are still part of our body. We might not think of them as holding an emotion, but they're neutral. They're there. So it's like, can you start to, wiggle your nose or hold your earlobe, massage your elbow. And so many clients have really rewired their connection to pain. It doesn't mean that they don't experience pain, but they're not focusing on it 100% of the time. And then long term, it's like they've used less medication.
Mhm.
They're actually moving more than they thought they could. Yeah, it's a huge game changer to focus on the places that we're not feeling the pain, the discomfort, even though we say like lean into the discomfort.
Right.
It's like
Right.
it's all about meeting us where we are. So if it's possible to do that, great, I can draw attention to that. But if that is the difficulty, if all I'm doing is fixating on
Right.
this, then it benefits me to find places where I'm not experiencing that. And it's not a bypassing, it's not a minimizing or a gaslighting. It's actually addressing it so that we can go back into where we're feeling those things.
And going back to what you said, it's like do the variety.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is about leaning in and tightening your hands. And then sometimes it is, well, it's difficult. Tony Robbins really spoke about when we give significance to things.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very mindful throughout my life and after studying his work to not say my anxiety. And I went through a bout of Lyme disease and my Lyme disease. And it's like, oh no, it's just something that I'm going through. And
Mm-hmm.
not all parts of me are like that. It's just kind of a transformative part. I really think our pain comes to transform us and interrupt our life and has
Yeah, we do that with
messages.
emotions. Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah.
Like
It's
I'm
just,
anxious. I'm an
yeah.
anxious person, and I'm like, I understand that. Can we maybe change the wording? Because wording is
Yes.
powerful too. Like
Yes.
I have anxiety,
Yes.
I'm experiencing
Yes.
anxiety. It's very different when we're like, I'm anxious. It's
Yes.
like we identify with it, and then when we
Yes.
don't have it, we're like, who am I? Who am I
Yes.
without my anxiety?
Yes. And then he goes down the human needs of like, well, then when we identify it, then we get benefits from it. So anything
Mhm.
that we're stuck in, we're gaining benefits from. And
Yeah.
it's not wrong or bad. We all do it. It's just one, when you say it, sounds like this, it sounds like stop. And then when it's like, well, I'm experiencing this, you feel more fluid. I use energy through it. So at least it's open to change.
Yeah.
And then if we don't want to, it's just, I think it's okay to not want to. I have this and I don't really want to change it right now. And
Yeah.
even that creates some kind of change because it brings the awareness of, I don't want to move through this right now. And that's okay.
Yeah, there's still agency in that. It's not that I'm apathetic towards it. It's actually that I'm saying I don't want that. So
Yeah.
I do those clients too, where I'm like,
Yeah.
what would you think about moving in this way? Or do you want to experience this? Right. And they're like, no, I don't, not right now. Okay. Thank you for letting me know.
Yeah. I
So
want
it's
to,
like
yes. There's
not
power
how
in
I'm
it. I
telling
want
you
to,
to move. It's like, are you ready to do that?
that's
Okay,
exactly
fine. We'll
it.
revisit that later.
I think it's so powerful, or anyone listening for healing. When we're ready, it happens, and it's okay sometimes to. I do this with anger with people quite a bit. Of do I want to be free or do I want to stay angry? And it's okay if you just want to stay angry right now, because just even that awareness that I want to stay angry already unconsciously starts shifting it. It's
Mm,
well, at least I know I'm choosing it now. At
that's
least I
right.
know you do have the solution. I'm just not ready to want to move that way, or I'm just not ready for it yet.
Mm,
I think there's even healing in that. So
yeah. I love that reframe. Thanks for sharing that.
yeah, I love your movement cards, and I want to talk to people. The book is called Body Aware, and it's so great for so many. I think you get different tones from it, so it's one of those ones I'm assuming you could read over and over and get something different each time, like something that
Mm,
stands out to you each time. Over the few days of reading it, I was in very different spaces when reading it, and I was reading it from a different way. Anyway, the cards, I love them. What made you create the card deck? And yeah, tell us about it. I This is the one that I found you with, so I love
yeah.
some movement cards and in the moment of when you need a shift, they're great.
Yeah. And thank you so much for your support with those and sharing them on social media too.
Yeah.
Um, well, so twofold. I think one, I was getting from people even after I wrote the book, like, great, how?
Hmm.
What? And I'm not one to tell people how to move,
Right.
but I recognize that many of us need that visual, or we need I can't think right now. I just need to like, just tell me, you know? So I'm indirect, I'm not telling people what to do. They still have agency, get to choose what it
You're
is.
inviting.
Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
inviting in the movement. And it's amazing that for, you know, whatever your level is with body awareness and movement, just hearing people say, pulling one card invited in more movement. I didn't even have to do another card that day. I just all of a sudden it was the jumping off point. So I think that was the narrative in the background after I wrote Body Aware, and I was like, what am I going to do next? I
Yes.
was like, one's enough. And then you kind of get the bug where you're like, I got to keep writing something, you know? But as unfortunate as it is, the deck actually came out of my own community's tragedy. So I live just down the street from Highland Park, Illinois, which is where there was an active shooting situation on July 4th, almost 2 years ago. And so even though thankfully my family and I were not actually there at the parade, we were like getting ready for our parade a couple of miles down the road. It definitely shook us to our
Oh,
core.
yeah.
You know, I'm not one to think that things can't happen in certain places or, you know, everywhere. But when it happens to you, it still sends shock through your
Shock,
body.
for sure.
Yeah. And we were told to lock down. And so a lot of this like feeling unprepared and what do we do now and uncertainty. When I always say this, like I referenced my body and mind to see if I was even in the capacity to help with efforts in the community. And I really felt like I could. I didn't know what that was going to look like, but I ended up volunteering for crisis counseling.
Oh,
And there were all of these resources, but you know, it's not the mainstream conversation quite yet where we're integrating body and movement into things. And so people were coming in dysregulated and they were leaving just as dysregulated,
yep.
you know, or even more so because maybe they had talked about what
Talked
they
about it. Yes.
saw
Yeah.
and, you know, relived the story, which had just happened a day ago. And that was like the light bulb moment for me. I was like, dang, I wish that I had a box of like
Yeah.
a pocket therapist, but a pocket movement therapist, you know, where I could just
Yes.
be like, you don't have to know why you're doing this or even understand what's happening as you're doing it. Just practice any of these at home,
Yep.
you know, lay on the floor, legs up before you go to bed, you know, and if you're feeling unsteady or dysregulated or your heart's pounding, it will help. It will help, you know.
Yes.
Are you sure? Don't ask questions, just do.
Just do it.
You know? But I didn't have that. And so I went to the publisher that I had worked with for Body Aware, kind of proposed the idea. And then with the interest, they were like, okay, make a proposal and we'll see what happens with this. And so, you know, that's really where the deck came from. And it's just meeting a need from also that population that's like, oh, good. Now there's something to do. You know, because
Yeah.
like I can't do it on my own yet. I
Yep.
do need a directive. But as you'll see, there's no image, right? The cards don't
Right.
show you what to do.
Right.
You have to really feel that for yourself.
Yep.
And yeah, you know, it was something I needed, but really something I wanted to be able to give back to the community. And unfortunately for many communities that will probably continue to need these resources.
Yes, and I know I've said this to you, and you probably keep hearing it as far as like, I love it for kids, even for ourselves, but we at least know why we're doing it. For kids,
Mm-hmm.
it's like when they just come back from school and they're dysregulated and we just don't know why, what they've come across today, what energy, emotional states their teachers in, their friends, whatever it is, they have such a great time. I love that you get to pick as an adult. I love the part of like, ooh, which card speaks to me today? I like that part.
Yeah.
But for them, they get to pick one and do it as a fun game, and they don't know they're regulating their system. They don't know. To me, I like it. I use the word discharge. I like like, how can we just discharge our energy today, cleanse it, like, and you do it through movement. Do the meditation stuff, and it's speaking to that Chicago part. It's really COVID is where I switched everything. It's how can we give ourselves tools day to day that we do. So when life shifts unexpectedly like that, we
Mm.
have something already. Like, don't wait for the
Yeah.
breakdown. Start doing it now. Start learning things now. And that way,
Right.
when life kind of valleys and peaks, you'll have something to do.
Yeah, and I think we're so used to it being outside of ourselves. You
Yes.
know, where's the, you know, metaphorically speaking or not, the
Yep.
pill? You know, what medication is
Yes.
going to help me? What you know, what regimen, what diet, etc. You know, and so even with body, you know, we're like, okay, well, you know, physical therapist, tell me what my body needs. You
Yep.
know, what are the exercises I should be doing? Um, Not to go into a whole tangent, but
Yeah.
most recently I went to physical therapy for about a month or two. And while I'm not a physical therapist
Right.
and I needed expertise in that area, I
Yeah.
found it so interesting that before I was even able to go to the PT, I would just, I mean, at some point it was painful to move. I had sciatica and I was like, okay, the only thing I can do is I'm going to lay down on the floor. And what looked like kind of writhing ended up being a lot of the movements, like the foundation of the movements that my physical therapist was having me do. And
Mhm.
so, what it might look like, gently opening up our hip flexor, or flexing and pointing my foot, which was actually nerve flossing. It was like, oh my God, yeah, your body knows what it
Right.
needs.
Yes.
But we have to create that space and time to actually let it be. And so that's, it's not a new concept at all. It's new to us because we're so used to looking for, intervention as opposed to like proactive prevention.
Yes, I changed my whole entire business model for that exact reason. For the
Mm,
reason people used to come to me, and then I saw how everyone was almost defenseless when they were going through COVID, that their doctor was busy, that this was busy, that, or the doctors just were overwhelmed because it spiked so high that so many people were left without something, without their
yeah.
chiropractor, without their person. And it's like, how can we have it that we're never without our body? We're never without our ability
Right.
to meditate, our mindset, our wiggling our fingers, and we
Yeah.
always have us with us. And I think it's to me anyway, the number one thing that I would recommend for myself, for everybody, to put some time into. It'll serve you well and serve your kids well
Yeah.
and everybody else around you.
Yeah, and while and I would never suggest this, but it's not like we're gonna pretend to be doctors or start writing
Yes.
ourselves prescriptions.
Right.
Thinking of like physical therapists, at least the ones I've worked with, they're not gatekeeping, right? They're not like you can only do these exercises with me and in
Right.
this office. The idea is they want you to do them outside of
Right.
the office, right?
Some
Like
doctors might do that, but then find one
some,
that is more open. Right.
right,
Yeah.
right. If someone's gatekeeping your movement practice, there's I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yes, it's just interesting,
Yeah.
and then at the end of the day, it should be things that we have at our disposal that we can do with what we already have. Use your body as a catalyst, as a tool, as a vessel, whatever
Yep.
word you want to use. Um, and we can also, obviously, we can go to people who can expand upon that for us, right? Like teach us a new way to move, give us insight onto how certain parts of the body can move,
Yep.
but they never know what it's like to be in our own body, and so to just I think entertain that, kind of like address those things, right?
Yes.
Knowing that even if you don't know a lot about your embodied experience, that you're still the expert of that experience.
So true. Your body has better wisdom than anybody else outside of yourself. And just like you said, like I instinctually knew to do that. And it's like, yes,
Right.
we have all the answers. It's just how much do we want to listen and then let life kind of show us. So
Mm.
thank you so
Yep.
much. Where can people find you? I'm going to post your link for your book and your cards in the show notes, but where can they find
Thanks.
you just to follow you?
Yeah, I tend to be most vocal, most engaged on Instagram these
Yes.
days. That's kind of my form of social media at The Therapist Who Moves You. But if people want to check out my website, it's my name, ericahornthal.com. And my email's there, my office phone number is there.
Right.
Like I love to connect with people, and they don't always take me up on that offer because who talks on the phone anymore, right?
Yes, right.
But I do enjoy that, so feel free to reach out if you have questions or clarification. And thank you for posting the links. Both resources
Yes.
are available really wherever you buy your books. So whether that's
Yes.
online or in an indie bookstore, the point is for it to be accessible.
Well, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure. Is there anything that you want to share before we head out that you want people to know?
Just going back to what you said at the beginning, right? That like we are our own tool for for all healing, but like for mental health especially. So, don't wait to move through challenges because someone's not available or there's no therapist in the area. It's like understand that there's a lot we could be doing, right? We are how we move, right? If we want to move parts of our mind or what we're experiencing in the mind, it benefits us to move our bodies while we're accessing other support as well.
So good. Thank you for all that you do.
Thanks. Take care.